My grandson looked up from his plate and asked the question that shattered the evening. "Grandpa, why do you rent a house when Grandma's mansion is sitting empty in a trust?" The table went silent. I set down my fork, reached for the leather folder I had brought for exactly this moment, and said, "Because the trust document they read at the funeral was a forgery, and the man who wrote it is your father." I watched my grandson's face cycle through confusion, then shock, then something I could not name. His father, my son, sat frozen at the far end of the table. My daughter-in-law's fork hovered midair. I had carried that leather folder for 3 years, waiting for the right moment. The trust that promised a 4-bedroom mansion in the hills, signed by my late wife's hand, was a complete fabrication. Every page, every signature. And the person who typed it, printed it, and found someone to witness it was sitting 20 feet away from me. This is not a story about money. It is about what happens when the person you raised decides that what is yours is theirs for the taking. What I told my grandson over the next hour would change our family forever. To understand what happened at that dinner table, I need to take you back 2 years. My wife Alina bought the Hilltop Mansion in 2005. She was a real estate developer, one of the sharpest in the county. She flipped properties, she managed commercial leases, she had an instinct for value that I never fully understood but always admired. I was a civil engineer. I built bridges. She built portfolios. The mansion was her crown jewel, a 4-bedroom Spanish colonial with terracotta roof tiles, a courtyard fountain, and a view that stretched all the way to the mountains on clear mornings. She paid $1.2 million cash. She was 47 years old. We had one son, Michael. He was 26 then, already working as a financial advisor at a regional bank. Alina doted on him. She paid for his college, his first car, the down payment on his starter home. She believed in giving him a foundation, not a handout. She used to say, "I want him to have enough to stand on, not enough to sit on." She meant it. In 2020, Alina was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lived 9. In those 9 months, she called her estate attorney, a woman named Sarah Chen, and updated her trust. I was present for the signing. I watched Alina read every page, initial every margin, and sign her full name in blue ink. The trust said the mansion passed to me, her husband, with the remainder to Michael after my death. She also left me a life insurance policy worth $400,000 and a brokerage account with another $300,000. Michael received a separate trust fund of $250,000. It was clean, it was fair, it was her final instruction. Alina died on a Tuesday in March. The funeral was the following Saturday. 2 days after that, Michael called and said he wanted to read the trust to the family. He said he had the document. He said Sarah Chen had given him a copy. I thought nothing of it. We gathered in Michael's living room. His wife Christine sat beside him. His son, my grandson, was 6 years old, playing quietly in the corner with a toy truck. Michael pulled out a document with a blue cover and began to read. The first page sounded familiar. By the third page, I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. The trust he read said the mansion passed directly to Michael, with a small life estate for me in the guest cottage. It said the brokerage account was to be split between Michael and a charity I had never heard of. It said the life insurance policy was designated to pay estate taxes. None of that matched what Alina had signed. I did not interrupt. I sat there in Michael's living room and listened. Christine dabbed her eyes. My grandson played with his truck, and I kept my face still while my mind ran through every possibility. Maybe I misremembered. Maybe Sarah Chen had sent the wrong version. Maybe Alina had changed her mind in those final weeks and never told me. I called Sarah Chen the next morning. She said she had never sent Michael a copy. She said the version he read aloud was not the trust she had drafted. She emailed me the original from her secure server. I printed it and put it next to the notes I had taken from Michael's reading. There were 12 discrepancies. 12. The property description, the beneficiary designations, the signature page format, even the notary stamp was from a county where Alina had never lived. I hired a forensic document examiner named Robert Kim. He charged $250 an hour. He examined high-resolution scans of both documents. He found that the signature on the version Michael had read was traced from a Christmas card Alina had sent 2 years earlier. The paper stock was standard office paper, not the heavyweight bond used by Sarah Chen's firm. The font was Georgia, not Garamond. The notary seal was a computer graphic, not an embossed stamp. Robert Kim wrote a 14-page report. He concluded, to a reasonable degree of forensic certainty, that the document Michael presented was a forgery. He also noted that the forger had made a critical mistake. They had listed 2 witnesses who did not exist. I called the names. One phone number was disconnected. The other was a pizza restaurant in Akron. I gave Michael a month to come forward voluntarily. I told him I had the report. I told him I had the original trust. I told him if he confessed to the family, we could resolve this privately. He promised he would. A month passed, then 2, then 6. Every holiday dinner, every birthday party, he acted like nothing had happened. He talked about the mansion as his future home. He discussed renovation plans with Christine. And I sat there, silent, holding the evidence, waiting for the moment that would force the truth into the light. That moment came on a Sunday evening in October. Michael and Christine brought my grandson over for a roast chicken dinner. The boy was 9 now, old enough to notice things, old enough to ask the questions adults avoid. Halfway through the meal, he looked at me and said, "Grandpa, why do you rent this little house when Grandma's mansion is sitting empty?" I looked at Michael. He looked at his plate. I knew then that the delay was over. I stood up, walked to my home office, and came back with the leather folder I had prepared 2 years earlier. I sat down and opened it, and I said the words that would either break my family or save it, because the trust document your father read at the funeral was a forgery. Michael didn't look at me. He looked at his son. Then he looked at Christine. Then he looked at the leather folder on the table like it was a live animal that might bite him. The silence stretched so long that the clock on the kitchen walls seemed to get louder. My grandson broke it first. "Dad, what does Grandpa mean?" Michael pushed his chair back and stood up. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. "I need to talk to my father alone." Christine took my grandson's hand and led him into the living room. The boy looked back over his shoulder at me, and I saw something in his eyes I had not seen before. Fear, not of me, of what was about to happen. The door clicked shut. Michael sat back down across from me. He put his hands flat on the table, palms down, and he said, "Okay, you're right, but it wasn't my idea." I let him talk. For the next 45 minutes, Michael laid it all out. After Alina's death, he had been drowning in debt. Credit cards, a car loan he had hidden from Christine, a margin call on a stock investment that had gone bad. He owed nearly $80,000. The mansion, if he controlled it outright, would have solved everything. He could sell it, pay off his debts, and still have enough left to look successful. He had approached Sarah Chen first, asking for an early distribution. She refused, so he found a template online, a generic trust form from a legal website, and he typed Alina's name and his own into it. He printed it on office paper. He traced her signature from an old Christmas card using a light box he bought at an art supply store. He found a notary stamp image online and photoshopped it onto the notary page. Then he had a friend named Derek Fisher witness it, a man who owed Michael a favor. Derek signed. The second witness name was fake. Michael told me this like a confession, like he had been waiting for this moment for 2 years. He said he had planned to come clean after a few months, but the longer it went, the harder it became. He said the guilt was unbearable. He said he had nightmares about Alina. I listened, then I asked a question that changed everything. "Who told you to use a light box?" Michael hesitated. "Derek mentioned it." "Derek isn't a document expert. Where did Derek get the idea?" Michael dropped his eyes. He stared at his hands for a long moment. "My boss," he said, "John Cortland, he's a senior vice president at the bank. He knew I was in trouble. He told me how to do it." I had met John Cortland once at a company Christmas party. He was a tall man with expensive glasses and a handshake that lingered too long. He was a trust officer. He handled estates professionally. And now he was sitting at the center of a forged trust document like a spider. That night after Michael left, I sat in my home office with the leather folder open. Robert Kim's report, Sarah Chen's original trust, the printed copy of Michael's forgery, and a new piece of paper, the name John Cortland. I made 3 phone calls the next morning. First to Sarah Chen, second to a criminal attorney named David Oakes, who specialized in fraud. third to the Ohio Department of Commerce, Division of Financial Institutions. What I learned over the next 2 weeks would turn this from a family tragedy into something far bigger. John Cortland had been investigated twice before for irregularities in estate accounts. Both times the bank had handled it internally. Both times he had been quietly reprimanded and moved to a different desk. David Oakes told me that if Michael was willing to testify, Cortland could face felony charges, but Michael would also be exposed. He had signed the forgery. He had presented it. He had lied to his family. I gave Michael 48 hours to decide. I told him if he cooperated, I would not press charges against him. I told him I would help him pay off his debts. I told him his mother would have wanted him to have a second chance. But I also told him that John Cortland needed to answer for what he had done. Michael agreed. He walked into David Oakes' office on a Thursday afternoon and gave a full statement. He named Derek Fisher. He provided the email records showing Cortland had forwarded him the template. He produced a text message from Cortland reading, "Use the cursive font, it looks more authentic." But the next day, something went wrong. Derek Fisher called me from a number I did not recognize. His voice was shaking. He said Michael had called him the night before and asked him to change his story. Michael wanted Derek to say that Cortland had nothing to do with it, that it was all Michael's idea. Derek refused. He drove straight to the police station and filed his own report. I sat in my office, phone in hand, and realized that Michael had just made the worst decision of his life. He had lied to me. He had lied to the attorney. He had lied under an agreement that was supposed to save him. The next court date was 48 hours away, and I was no longer sure whose side I was on. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but the weight inside it was enormous. David Oakes sat beside me, his notepad open, his pen moving in small, precise circles. Michael sat 2 rows behind with Christine. He had not spoken to me since the Derek Fisher call. I could feel his stare on the back of my neck, a mixture of anger and shame that I recognized because I had felt it myself as a father watching his son destroy everything. John Cortland arrived with an attorney named Elaine Reeves, a woman with silver hair and a voice like a steel trap. She had represented the bank in 3 previous civil cases and never lost. She sat down, crossed her legs, and looked at David Oakes the way a cat looks at a bird. The judge was a man named Harold Barnes, 68 years old, with reading glasses perched on his nose and an expression that suggested he had seen every kind of human failure and was no longer surprised by any of it. Derek Fisher testified first. He walked to the stand in a wrinkled blue suit. He did not look at Michael. He told the court that Michael had asked him to witness a document. He said the document had already been signed when he saw it. He said Michael had told him it was a simple power of attorney, not a trust. He said he had not known Alina, had never met her, and had no idea her signature was forged. The judge asked him why he signed. Derek said, "Because Michael was my friend." Then David Oakes played the text messages. Michael's phone had been seized and extracted. The messages showed the full conversation between Michael and John Cortland. "I can't do this myself," Michael wrote. "You won't have to," Cortland replied. "Just follow the steps I gave you." Then Cortland forwarded a link to the template website. Then he sent 2 more messages. "Use the light box for the signature and make sure the witnesses are people no one will check." Elaine Reeves objected on the grounds that Cortland's messages were taken out of context. The judge overruled her. She asked for a sidebar. The judge waved her off. Then Cortland took the stand. He was calm, polished, wearing a navy suit that cost more than my first car. He said Michael had come to him in distress after Alina's death, that Michael had mentioned wanting to adjust the inheritance, and that Cortland had advised him to consult an attorney. He denied ever mentioning a light box or a forgery template. He said the text messages were mischaracterized. He said Michael had been confused. But the prosecution had something Cortland did not expect. A forensic digital analyst testified that Cortland's work computer had been used to access the template website at 2:14 a.m. on the same date Michael claimed to have received the link. The search history had been deleted, but the IT department at the bank had a backup. The analyst produced a report showing the search terms, Ohio Trust template Word document, and how to replicate handwritten signature. The IP address was Cortland's office terminal. The login credentials were his. Elaine Reeves argued that someone else could have used his terminal. The analyst testified that the terminal required a keycard and a password, and that the log showed Cortland's badge swipe at 1:58 a.m. the same night. Cortland was the only person with access to that floor after midnight. The courtroom went quiet. Cortland's face, for the first time, lost its composure. The judge called a recess. When we returned, David Oakes stood up and said, "Your Honor, the state is prepared to charge John Cortland with 2 counts of forgery, 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud, and 1 count of tampering with evidence. We request that bail be set at $250,000. Elaine Reeves objected. The judge denied the objection. He set bail at $200,000 and ordered Cortland to surrender his passport. But that was not the worst part. That same afternoon, the Ohio Department of Commerce released a preliminary finding. During their audit, they had discovered that Cortland had manipulated not just Elena's trust, but 3 other estates over the previous 5 years. The total misappropriated funds exceeded $1.7 million. 2 of those estates involved elderly clients who had died without close relatives. The third involved a widow who was still alive, living in a nursing home, whose monthly payments had been redirected to a shell account Cortland controlled. Michael sat in the hallway after the hearing. His head was in his hands. Christine stood beside him, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. My grandson was at a friend's house, unaware that his father was now a cooperating witness in a federal investigation. I walked over to Michael. I put my hand on his shoulder. He looked up at me with red eyes and said, "I thought if I just did what he told me, it would fix everything. I thought I was the one in control." His voice broke. I was never in control. I did not say I told you so. I did not say you should have come to me first. I said, "You can still walk through this, but only if you tell the truth from now on, every time, no more cuts." He nodded. Christine put her hand on his other shoulder, and the 3 of us stood in that courthouse hallway, surrounded by the wreckage of a family that would never be the same. The mansion sat empty on the hill. Elena's garden, the one she had planted with roses and lavender, had grown wild. The fountain in the courtyard had stopped running 2 years earlier. I had not been there since the day of her funeral. But I was about to go back, because the will contest was over. The trust was restored, and I had a decision to make about what to do with a house that held my wife's memory and my son's betrayal. That decision would define the rest of my life. I drove up the hill on a Thursday morning in November. The gate was rusted, the intercom dead. I had to push it open by hand. The driveway was cracked, weeds pushing through the asphalt like they had been waiting for permission. The mansion looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, emotionally. The terracotta roof had missing tiles. The courtyard fountain was dry, leaves piled in the basin. I stood at the front door with the key Elena had given me 20 years earlier, the same key I had never surrendered. I opened the door. The air inside was stale, heavy with the smell of closed windows and old furniture. Dust sheets covered the couches. The clock on the mantel had stopped at 4:47 the moment the battery died. I walked through the living room, the kitchen, the hallway where Elena's photograph still hung, her face in every frame, her smile, her eyes that saw through everyone. I stopped in her study. Her desk was exactly as she had left it. A half-empty coffee mug, a stack of blueprints for a renovation she never started, and a letter propped against the lamp with my name on it. I had not seen it before. The funeral director had cleared the house. Michael had been here, but somehow this letter had survived. I opened it. The date on it was 3 days before she died. "Thomas, if you are reading this, I am gone, and something has gone wrong. I have written this letter and hidden it in my desk because I want you to know the truth. Michael is not as strong as he pretends to be. He will make mistakes. He will let people lead him. I love him, but I see him. I have asked Sarah Chen to watch over the trust. But if you are reading this, it means she could not stop him. Do not let him destroy himself, and do not let him take the house. The house is yours. I built it for us, but here is what I want you to know. If he confesses, if he tells the truth, forgive him, not for him, for you." I sat in her chair. I read the letter 3 times, then I folded it and put it in my pocket. The criminal case against John Cortland went to trial 6 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. The text messages, the computer logs, the testimony from 3 other estate victims. Elaine Reeves tried to argue that Cortland was a victim of circumstance, that he had been under pressure from bank performance targets. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 7 years in state prison, with an additional 3 years for the nursing home victim's embezzlement. He was ordered to pay restitution of $1.9 million. Michael faced a different path, because he had cooperated early, because he had provided the evidence that convicted Cortland, and because his attorney argued that he had been manipulated by a superior. The prosecutor offered a plea deal: 1 count of forgery reduced to a misdemeanor, 18 months of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a requirement to complete a financial ethics course. Michael accepted. He stood in front of the judge and apologized. He turned to me and apologized again. He turned to Christine, who was holding my grandson's hand, and apologized a 3rd time. The judge accepted the plea. Michael did not go to prison. But something else happened that day that no one expected. After the hearing, as we walked out of the courthouse, my grandson tugged my sleeve. He was 11 now, old enough to understand what had happened. He looked up at me and said, "Grandpa, did Dad really try to take Grandma's house?" I knelt down so I was at his eye level. "Yes, he did." "Are you mad at him?" I thought about Elena's letter. I thought about the 3 years of silence, the leather folder, the dinner table confession. I looked at Michael, standing 20 feet away, talking to his attorney. He looked like a man who had been carrying a weight so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. "I was mad," I said, "but I'm not anymore." "Why not?" "Because your grandmother told me not to be." He tilted his head. "Grandma told you she's dead. She left me a letter. She said to forgive him." He thought about that for a long moment. Then he said, "Grandma was smart." I smiled for the first time that day. Yes, she was. The mansion did not stay empty. I made a decision. I moved back in, not because I wanted to live there again, but because Elena had built it for us, and letting it rot felt like letting her memory decay. I spent 3 months renovating. I repaired the roof, replanted the garden, restored the fountain. I kept her study exactly as it was. The letters stayed in my pocket for the first week. Then I put it in a frame on her desk. Michael and Christine came to visit every Sunday. At first, the visits were awkward, full of silences and half-finished sentences. But over time, they became normal. He helped me fix the gate. She planted new roses. My grandson learned to swim in the pool Elena had insisted on building. John Cortland appealed his conviction. The appeal was denied. And 18 months after the trial, on a warm June afternoon, I sat on the back patio with Elena's letter in my hand and watched the sun set over the mountains. My grandson was splashing in the pool. Michael and Christine were inside making dinner. The house was alive again. I folded the letter and put it away. I thought about what Elena had said. "Forgive him, not for him, for you." She was right. Carrying the anger had not hurt Michael. It had hurt me. That evening after dinner, my grandson came and sat next to me on the steps. The sky was dark, the stars coming out one by one. He said, "Grandpa, do you think Grandma can see us right now?" I looked up at the stars. "I think she can see everything. Even the bad stuff. Especially the bad stuff. That's why she left the letter." He leaned against my arm. "I'm glad you forgave Dad." "Me too, buddy, me too." And for the first time in 3 years, I felt the full weight of that forgiveness settle into my chest, not as a burden, but as a release. The foundation held, not because the house was strong, but because I had finally let go of the wreckage I had been carrying. In the morning, I would call the realtor about the rental house. I did not need it anymore. I had my home back, not the building, my family. The foundation held, not because the house was strong, but because I had finally let go of the wreckage I had been carrying. In the months that followed, I learned something I had not expected. Forgiveness is not a single act. It is a daily decision. Some mornings I still felt the anger stirring, the memory of that dinner table, the sound of Michael reading his mother's forged words aloud. But I had Elena's letter, and I had a grandson who asked questions I could not avoid. The mansion became a gathering place again. Birthdays, holidays, Sunday dinners. Christine and I found a rhythm. She stopped apologizing. I stopped waiting for her too. Michael took the financial ethics course and started volunteering at a local food bank. He told me once quietly that he thought about the forgery every day. I told him that was probably a good thing, not as punishment, as a compass. John Cortland is serving his sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 4 years. The bank paid restitution to all 3 estates. The nursing home victim's family received a settlement that covered her care for the rest of her life. But the story does not end with the legal system. There is a question that stays with me, and I want to leave it with you. What do you do when the person who hurt you is someone you love, not a stranger, not an enemy, your son, your daughter, your brother? The law can punish. The courts can restore property, but the wound inside a family, that is not something a judge can heal. I am 65 years old. I spent 31 years building bridges. I know that every structure, every relationship, every trust requires maintenance. Neglect it, and the cracks appear. But I also know that even the deepest crack can be repaired if you are willing to do the work. Elena's garden is blooming again. The fountain runs. My grandson has learned to dive. And I sit on the patio every evening, watching the sun drop behind the mountains, holding a letter from a woman who saw everything coming and loved us anyway. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think about your own family, your own boundaries, your own capacity to forgive, consider subscribing, because there are more stories like this, and they are all worth telling. The foundation holds, but only if you let it.